And welcome to today's webinar, the one-to-one and BYOD for K through 12 webinar. While we kind of wait for the last couple people to trickle in here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the agenda and then kind of really dive into the matter at hand. One of the things I really enjoy doing in webinars is actually kind of trying to make it as tailored to the audience as possible. And so as I'll kind of talk about it, we'll have a Q&A session at the end, but throughout the entirety of this webinar, feel free to ask questions. If there's something that you found interesting and maybe glanced over, or you just have a question in general, feel free to ask them, and I'll try to incorporate it into the demo that I'm giving or even whatever I'm talking about at the time. But kind of for a brief agenda, I'll talk a little bit about Cisco Meraki, who we are, what we do, how we came to be. I'll then talk about the cloud networking architecture, just to explain what it really means to be a cloud networking company. And then really kind of focus in on why Meraki works so well in both one-to-one and BYOD scenarios. And I'll kind of supplement that by showing it via live demo on how we kind of manage with devices at Meraki in a BYOD sense and also in a one-to-one sense in terms of computers. And then kind of the 5 key steps we have when we're designing these sorts of networks, and then ending it with kind of the rest of the product family. I'm really going to focus on our wireless and our EMM solution this webinar. I might touch a little bit on our security, but if you have questions about other product families, feel free to ask. So with that, I'll jump right in and talk a little bit about Cisco Meraki. So Cisco Meraki creates a completely cloud-managed networking solution. And what that means is we actually make everything from our own hardware to our own backend. And as a result, we have a really solid control over what our customers can do with their devices. So whether we're dealing with wireless, switching, security, or EMM or MDM, we have full control of the back end and full control of the devices that are interfacing with the network. And we've really seen the area of cloud-managed networking take off, and we're one of Cisco's fastest-growing portfolios with tens of millions of devices connected worldwide. And the reason really is that the cloud model makes sense in the networking space. The idea behind bringing cloud to networking is really to bring the 3 kind of key benefits of the consumer cloud and port them over to enterprise networking. And the idea behind this is really one, kind of the most obvious, which is you want to have access to data at all times, especially in K through 12 deployments where it's either district-wide or even your own school. IT staffs are always understaffed. And so being able to be almost at 2 places at once, being, in a different room looking at the network statistics there while fixing something in another room is always an incredibly handy tool to have. The second, and what I think is probably the most nifty portion, is the ability to keep things up to date. So in a traditional networking sense, it's actually pretty difficult to get all of your devices up to date. It might require having a LAN controller, plugging into the controller, updating it, etc. So having the cloud be able to keep your devices up to date is something that's incredibly important and really alleviates a lot of unnecessary work that otherwise falls to IT administrators. And then last but not least, by having the cloud backend really kind of tackle all the nitty-gritty, it makes devices really just work. And that's kind of the beauty of Meraki. You can quite simply just plug in an access point, it'll turn on, and it's ready to go. There's no additional configuration needed. It was very, very literally plug and play. And kind of that model that we've applied to networking has been recognized for innovation, whether it's in the Gartner Magic Quadrant or CRN's coolest technologies. And it's a field we're really excited about and we're seeing grow at a great rate. And really what motivates us to continue this and kind of to improve this is our customers. And the more and more we hear from our customers about what they want to have, what they're missing, what could make their lives even easier, is stuff that we try to incorporate into our devices to kind of give everyone the best cloud networking and just networking experience in general. And you can kind of see that it's taken, especially in K through 12 campuses, right? We've been able to simplify and even provide complicated networks a little more simply to schools because we can alleviate the necessity for having large IT staffs. Our cloud backend kind of, again, deal with the nitty-gritty so that the more core important tasks can be left to the actual IT team and their days and, taken up doing more kind of nitty-gritty stuff. And that's something that we're really proud of, and we continue to kind of focus in, whether it's developing new switch lines or MX lines, to focus on the education, or even on our EMM front, spending significant engineering effort so that we can integrate well with iOS 9.3 and kind of bring the whole education suite to our end users. So to kind of transition a little, I want to talk about the cloud networking architecture. So what does it mean to use a cloud network? And so kind of the idea behind the cloud is, instead of having a controller locally, we are the controller in the cloud. So your access points are in constant communication with our cloud. So that's how we know if they're up, if they're experiencing throughput issues, whatever it might be. And all of that information is coalesced and then presented to you in the form of the dashboard. And that's what I'll be showing in the live demo. So you can really see what it is to use Meraki and what it is to manage your devices live during this webinar. There are a couple things to kind of talk to about the cloud, right? The cloud always gets a little heat because, information is now kind of in the cloud. What if someone gets it? What happens if it's not secure? What happens if the cloud goes down? And so we've done a really, really good job of making sure kind of those are all issues we address very carefully and very concretely. So when it comes to terms and scaling, Meraki is quite good at making sure that no matter how small or how large your deployment gets, we're ready for you, right? You've got unlimited throughput. There are no LAN controller bottlenecks, right? So you can actually add entire sites in minutes. At the same time, we work really hard to make sure that our cloud centers are highly reliable, which means we've got multiple data centers in the United States and actually across the entire world. And we have a 99.99% uptime SLA, so you seeing the Meraki cloud go down is pretty rare. But the kind of really cool thing that we've done is that even if the cloud does go down, let's say you can't connect to Meraki, it doesn't mean your devices stop working. Your devices work just as they normally would, with the inability for you to immediately make changes to them. So it's one of those things where even if the cloud goes down, no one actually really notices. And then last but certainly not least is security. So one of the big things we like to point out is that no user traffic ever goes through the cloud. So I'll be showing you some of these things in terms of either traffic analytics or even app restrictions on the EMM front. But what's important to note is that none of this data is actually coming through the cloud. So the only really thing that communicates with the cloud is management data. So what's your SSID name? What's the password? When is it coming on? When is it coming off? Things like that. Is a device online? That's the kind of information we're gathering, but not like what website are they currently on? What web page are they looking at? What app is on right now? That kind of information we don't actually touch at all. We're also fully HIPAA and PCI compliant, and we are continually running third-party security audits and penetration testing to make sure that, of course, our network stays secure and that your data stays secure. If you're curious about more into what exactly we're doing, how we go about it, what's kind of the awards we've gotten for security, you can go to meraki.cisco.com/trust, and they'll talk a little bit about that. So the next thing to talk to is, why do we use Cisco Meraki for the K-12 environment, right? And it kind of breaks itself down into three big reasons. The first is intuitive centralized management. So kind of like I was talking to before, especially in K-12 deployments, there are not large IT teams that work on the entirety of the deployment, right? So the ability for something to have no training, no complex command line, full control, and have a full stack solution really helps simplify the process for IT managers, right? Everything is in one single pane of glass. You're seeing all your schools, all your students, all of the things happening on your network, so it's incredibly easy to work with. But on top of it being easy to work with, we don't make it easy by reducing what you can do, right? It's an incredibly flexible platform. So if you want to do something complicated, it can handle complex routing, whether it's site-to-site VPNs, OSPF, things like that. But at the same time has a large number of tools so that you don't actually need to be on site or right next to the switch or touching the AP to help diagnose, fix, or even optimize your network or issues that come through it. So really designed to kind of get your network up and running with minimal interaction. And then, of course, we've got the industry-leading technology when it comes to visibility, control, things like that. So you can really see who's on your network, how your network's being used, and then optimize your network to either prioritize or deprioritize things that need change. And so when we kind of drill that down into the classroom sense, the big things we see our customers using it for is one, of course, satisfying classroom demand, right? We've got a lot of students in a very confined area, all trying to use, the internet. We, of course, need to maintain security, visibility, and control, right? These are still students. We should put some form of content filter on them. We don't want to enable them doing things they shouldn't be doing at school. And then, of course, we need to preserve network reliability and user experience, especially if the network is a key portion of classroom learning, right? We don't want students to, access a local share, and then lo and behold, the local share is down because the network, and now the class is kind of at a standstill because the teacher needed a PDF or an application or something that was hosted locally. So those are kind of the three big things that we see kind of as crucial points when developing and designing your network. And on the BYOD front, we get a little bit of different, right? We still need to maintain security, visibility, and control. But now instead of a curated user base, we've got a dynamic one, right? Where students are bringing in their own phones, they're bringing in their own computers, their own tablets, whatever it might be. But it doesn't mean that we can get slack on what types of restrictions we're putting, right? If we're still trying to maintain particular content control and content filtering, we should be able to, right? If we want to be able to recognize what's a school-owned device versus a non-school-owned device, or what could be a potentially risky device, and have the network react to that, that's also important. And at the same time, when we're dealing with BYOD devices, we want to really minimize the IT burden, right? We don't want the IT team needing to deal with the brunt of all the BYOD policies or changes or requirements that come into play. We want to make that as automatic and automated as possible. And I'll show you some of the cool things we do here at Meraki that kind of keep our IT team very, very small. And so that I'm going to kind of talk about how we go through building a one-to-one and a BYOD ready network. So the first thing that really is important is, of course, segmenting the devices in your network. And that's kind of what we do here at Meraki. So these two screenshots are from our Meraki network, which I can show you guys in a little bit. But we've kind of segmented it into the corporate network, the engineering network, and the guest network, right? And these all have the necessity to have access to different shares. So we've got multiple SSIDs, right? We don't want to flood the airspace with SSIDs, but we've got a couple. We then do identity-based group policies with restrictions for different users. So that means is when you log in, maybe we've got, so you can see one of these access or SSIDs uses a custom radius solution, right? The other one actually uses Meraki radius, so we can host a bare bones radius for you, and then our guest one obviously is open. But with this, we kind of have two identity engines, and based on those engines, we can say, okay, it looks like a student logged in. I'm going to apply the content filter for adult content. Or, oh, okay, I see a teacher is logged in. I'm going to still allow them access to Facebook, but when a student logs in, I'm going to block for that student device access to Facebook. So kind of based on who's on the device, we can apply different tags and start kind of applying different layer 3, layer 7 traffic shaping rules. And you'll kind of see, even as we look here on our Meraki Corp, you can see our corporate networks being tagged to 110, our engineering network's not being tagged, our guest network's not being tagged. So you can kind of get a feel for the diversity you can place, and I'll show you how really straightforward it is to kind of implement. The next kind of big thing that, especially with Apple devices, is Bonjour forwarding, right? When you start segmenting things into different VLANs, let's say a guest VLAN, student VLAN, teacher VLAN, depending on how you set up your network, where are your Apple TVs? Where are your printers? And how are we going to make sure that, teachers can still print things or share things and students can still do it if these devices are on different VLANs? And we kind of tackle that with Bonjour forwarding. So it doesn't really matter which VLAN you're on, as long as you kind of create these Bonjour forwarding rules, it'll be as if those devices, those Apple TVs, those printers are all on the same VLAN that the user is. So it really simplifies your network kind of layout because you don't have to worry about Bonjour forwarding. The next big thing is, of course, control admission, right? Who is connecting and what are they getting as a result? So we kind of have a couple things here, right? We've got open ones, right? So this is for when you want internet only, guest access, maybe when parents come on campus, things like that. But you can still splash them. You can give them SMS login. If you're trying to get Facebook likes for your school, you can give them Facebook login. You can splash them with the basic terms of conditions, whatever it might be. You then got lobby ambassador, right? So this is when maybe if you need access to the internet, you need to go to the front desk as a parent, and the people at the front desk will give you a username and password, and you can have access for a little bit. You can do shared secrets, right? This is kind of one of the more popular ones I see. So a lot of times I see a teacher SSID with one PSK and then a student SSID with a separate PSK, and that way, you're segregating your student and teacher internet. Inevitably, your students somehow find out the teacher PSK, but I can show you some clever ways where that doesn't really affect your network. And then last but not least, you've got username and password, right? So whether that's, native Active Directory with Radius authentication or even Meraki hosted Radius authentication, it's a great way to place a user identity to a device. So when someone logs in, you can apply rules based off the groups they're in or whatever the use case might be. Then after we've kind of created control admissions, we need access, right? So now that I've figured out how they're getting onto the network, what do they actually get on the network? And so that kind of boils down to layer 3 firewall rules. Maybe you need LAN isolation, it gets into VLAN tags, and it gets into layer 7 application and firewall rules. After that, you of course need to build capacity, right? So now that we've kind of set the back end, we've kind of configured dashboard, we know what we want to do, how do we make sure we have the right hardware to deal with what I'm going to get when I get all my students into like a room? And so here we kind of will have no longer really the MR26 and 34, but we've got the MR42, which is particularly well suited for high density 802.11 AC environments, right? So for all of those newer devices, we can make sure they're getting AC, they're getting kind of the latest, greatest, and these access points can really handle large loads. So the more and more students that connect to it, it's not really a huge issue. So it's ideal for areas where you see clusters of students, lunchrooms, playgrounds, assembly areas, you name it. Right? And this is suitable for a one-to-one scenario where you know that all 25 students are going to have a device, or even BYOD deployments where all students might have 2 devices or 3 devices or however many they might bring. And so with onboard tools for monitoring and referencing, you can actually watch your network grow and expand, and then using some of the data that we provide you, actually start to optimize where I should be placing my access point, things like that. The next thing to kind of think about is then control of application consumption, right? As more and more devices clamor for the internet, people are playing games on their phone, they're streaming Netflix, they're watching YouTube videos on their laptops, they're bringing tablets in, they have their PSPs and their DSs and whatever it might be, there starts to become a necessity to put traffic shaping rules, right? Maybe you want to limit your music and video that's happening at school down to 500 or maybe 1 megabit per second so that students aren't tearing through bandwidth for things that are not school essential. And that way you can start prioritizing what application traffic matters on your network and making sure that kind of gets out first and is always going to have a smooth experience. So if the student watching YouTube has to buffer a little bit, it's not the end of the world, because when they're using web applications to teach, when teachers are using these web applications, the students in the classroom aren't actually being affected. So kind of with that, before I kind of jump into the rest of the products, I'm going to switch gears into a live demo, and I'll show you what it looks like live and kind of those 5 considerations we just talked to, how we've deployed them kind of at Meraki, and kind of how that still applies to the K-12 setting. So I'm going to switch gears here, and right now what we're looking at is we're looking at an overview of the Meraki network. So it's actually a pretty big network. So we've got an office here in San Francisco, which you can see. We've got an office in London, and we've got another office here in Australia. And we've got like a couple of people located, across the U.S., some in Mexico, some in Canada. But it gives you a sense, kind of at a glance, what's happening on my network. And it really gives me like a good feel of if I log in and I see lots of green, that's great. If I start to see lots of red, that's not so great. So I can start to drill in and say, okay, well, where are my reds, right? And as I move in, like what is causing these issues? So it looks like the closer I get here, I'll see, okay, so it looks like I have an access point offline and another access point offline, right? And so it took a fix. I know what my problem is, and now I can actually kind of drill in and get to the core of the problem and fix it. Maybe those access points need to be rebooted. Maybe the switch they're plugged into, those ports need to be balanced or something like that. But one of the cool things we can do here, especially when we're talking about our access points, is actually put a little bit of effort in at the beginning, and it pays off, well into the end, is place them on a map. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is load up the floor plan for the Cisco Meraki office. So what I'll do here is, sorry, let me jump to the wireless map. So what we're looking here is a floor plan for Cisco Meraki. So we're right now looking at the 5th floor, which has got a couple of APs. But I can actually kind of jump down and let's look at the 4th floor. This is probably our busiest floor, as you can see by these very noisy circles. But it's a little difficult to see with the circles, so I'm going to go ahead, turn those guys off. And now we're looking at a pretty clean floor plan of the Cisco Meraki office, right? And here what's really powerful is you can see where all of our access points are placed. And some of the cool things you can do here is, and I'll show you this as we kind of dive a little deeper into the stack, but I can know where this access point is. So if this goes down, I can look at this map and say, hey, okay, like right across the stairwell on the wall is an access point. That guy's down. That's what I need to replace. And similarly, we actually give you information as to what switch it's connected to, what switch port it's connected to. So maybe the access point's not what's wrong. The cable maybe died, or the cable got cut or damaged, and that's why we have issues or something like that. So it really allows for you to very quickly react to hardware-based issues. And some of the other interesting things you can do, and I'll kind of show you here, is we can make use of the data analytics portion that Meraki provides you to start optimizing your network. So what I'm going to load up here is what we call our location heat map, and it basically describes how our devices use our access points throughout a period of time. So we could, for example, look at maybe yesterday's usage. And it does a really good job of kind of managing and describing areas of your network that have a lot of use versus little use, and you can kind of start to adjust your access point deployments based on that, right? So maybe you are in the kitchen and you notice that not that many people use the kitchen, so we don't need that many access points for it. And so this is kind of what the heat map will show you. This one will take a little bit to chug through because we recently had a lot of people come into the office. But what we'll kind of see as I move through the heat map is right now we're looking at the afternoon of yesterday, right? So you can see that there's a pretty big cluster, but as time moves on, kind of the density of redness is decreasing because the amount of devices that are using the internet and access points are decreasing, right? So this area is pretty much dead now, right? We've only seen some usage here, and now we're well into the morning, and other than a couple of devices that stay online, we don't really see any usage, right? But as the morning starts to pick back up, we're going to see kind of usage picks back up as people come into the morning, and you'll see like a pretty quick red jump. Here are the people who got in at 6 a.m. on the sales team, and now, we're kind of back to standard usage. But with this, you can kind of start to see dead zones and areas where like, okay, we don't actually have that many people in this area using it. One AP is good to serve it. Or maybe we're noticing like there's a decent amount of usage here, but we don't really have an access point here, right? The access points are a decent distance. So maybe I do need to place another one here. So it's a great tool to kind of give you a feel for what's happening kind of real time, on your network. And so kind of with that, the next thing I want to show you guys is just how you're managing your access points, right? So it's incredibly straightforward to add and remove access points. Right here we've got a list of all 116. And it's a pretty nifty tool that we can, let's say we want to sort these by usage. So let's say, or maybe we want to do current clients. So let's throw in the current clients tab. I'm going to sort by that so I can see which access points have the most clients kind of connected to them. And then we can kind of jump into an access point and say, okay, like, let's see, these access points have got like a decent amount of usage. So if I was to jump into this access point, we can kind of at a glance get a decent sum of information. We can see the live data. So we've got 22 clients currently connected to it. It looks like most of them are using 5 gigahertz, which is great. That's kind of what we want. And you can start to see like the uplink traffic as this loads. You can start to see an event log. You can grab location analytics, run some tools if you want to run tools, look at some LAN stuff, check the RF of the area. So very useful tool. So here we're seeing we're pulling 20 some down for the 22 clients, 10 up. And if I wanted to look at the event log, I could see what it is. So it looks like PWiz is disassociating and reassociating. We can kind of see where exactly this access point has been placed. We can run a fair number of tools, whether it's pinging, rebooting, blinking LEDs, throughput, trace route, table, you name it. We can kind of see what's happening on the VLAN itself. So this is on the untagged VLAN. If I want to jump into a different VLAN, I can say, hey, it looks like we don't have any errors on VLAN 112. Do the same thing for DHCP. We can see all of the ACKs. And we can even look into RF. So if we want to see why our connection isn't the greatest, we can say, hey, okay, what's the channel utilization looking like? So it looks like over time we actually have less than 25% utilization on the 5 gigahertz, but if we want to switch maybe to 2.4, we see it's pretty low as well. So we don't have too much noise, and that's like a good thing. That's what we're looking for. But one of the cool things we can do from this is we can actually kind of, from this information, see where these connections lie. And that kind of goes into our network-wide topology tool. And this is one of the cooler things you can do with the full stack, and it allows you to see kind of everything on your network, right? So I don't know if everyone's aware, but we've recently released our phone line, so you can now actually see our phones on the topology. So our reception phone is right here. Here are all of the access points on our first floor, and this is the access switch. So we've got a stacked switch. That's what they're connected to. And I can really, jump into one of these and say, okay, this is the access point. I can see what switch it's connected to, where that goes, what the actual line is. So if I was curious, right, this is on port 10. We've got a gig line. 34 gigs have been used in the past day. There were 14 clients. Right, I can jump into this. This has got a 10 gig line, right, connecting to our switch, and so on and so forth as we kind of jump all the way back to our security appliances and, our other devices on our network. But it's a really good way to get a comprehensive view of what's happening. So you can clearly see these moving here. These are our phone switches, right? We've got all of our phones connected here. Depending on what name, we can actually see who it is, who's connected to the phones. These are our conference room phones, and you can kind of get a sense of what's happening. So it's a really cool, incredibly useful tool when it comes to dealing with your entire network topology. Now, if we wanted to dig into actually setting up our SSIDs, there's some cool things we can take into consideration, right? So like I showed you earlier, we've got the corporate network, the engineering network, and now we've got Meraki Blizzard, which is our own kind of different network. And each access point can broadcast up to 15 SSIDs. Hopefully you don't ever need to do more than that. But like we were saying, we've got Meraki radius, custom radius, and we can place different rules, right? Meraki Blizzard goes on a different VLAN. Meraki Corp goes on a different VLAN. And setting up your SSIDs is really straightforward. So if I wanted to edit the settings for, let's say, Meraki Corp, it's a very simple process, right? We break it down into choosing how you want to associate. Is it your radius server? Is it Meraki auth? Are you doing a pre-shared key? If you are, do you want to throw a splash page to your students? So we have here, and this is going to be like the next portion I talked to, which is Systems Manager, our EMM solution. But are you interested in using that? Maybe you're a large school and you use Cisco ICE. More power to you, and you can use the engine. And then you can kind of jump in to configuring things like, are these APs in NAT mode? Are they in bridge mode? How is your tagging going to be dealt with? Are you doing 5 gigs only? Are you going to do 2.4 and 5? So how do you want to make these broadcasts? So it's really straightforward and easy to quickly configure these. And these settings get applied to all your APs. So you don't have to configure them on an AP per AP basis. And that's kind of the easy portion of configuring, your Meraki network. So we could do the same thing with Meraki Eng. So our engineering network, we're going to use our own cloud-hosted radius that Meraki has. We don't need a splash page. It's just going to bridge onto the LAN. So very, very simple, straightforward, easy to connect to. And that's kind of the power of Meraki. It's the simplicity to be able to manage all of these access points and this entire network with just a couple clicks. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and jump into Systems Manager, which is our MDM/EMM, and talk to how that pairs really well with our network. So before I do that, I'm going to actually look a little bit at the questions and see what kind of questions we have, and then I'll kind of jump back into to the demo. Okay, so some of the questions we have are regarding integration between Systems Manager and our wireless stack. So that's actually a really good way to introduce Systems Manager to everyone. So what I want to talk to before that is what I call group policies. So when I was outlining those 5 steps, some of the things we talked about was controlling application access, right? So what do we do once we know which user is on the network? How do we gate what's happening to them? And that's what we use, or what we call group policies. And group policies are basically a set of traffic shaping and bandwidth rules and firewall rules that you can apply to specific groups of devices. So let's, for example, look at throttle no video. So as the name suggests, we have a layer 7 firewall rule that blocks all video and music. We have put a custom band limit of 1 megabit per second, right? Hence the throttle, and we are tagging them on the VLAN 100, right? There is a nifty thing here where, let's say you are on the corporate network. We put you on throttle video because we notice all you do is watch Friends at the office and not necessarily work. So now you can't watch Friends, right? We've denied that layer 7. But we know that WebEx is important because everyone at the company uses WebExes for demos, phone calls, etc. So instead of limiting WebEx to 1, we're actually going to give it unlimited bandwidth and tag it with the highest priority. So that way it's making sure it gets through our network first. So your actual work experience, like deteriorating, but Friends is just not something you're going to be able to watch at the office anymore. And one of the cool things you can do once you start to establish these group policies, right? So these are network policies at their core. What we can do is we can apply them to Systems Manager, right? So Systems Manager is how we manage your end devices. So the full stack, the switching, the wireless, the security appliance, all of that is how you manage your network. But then kind of your endpoints really define how you design your network. And that's where Systems Manager makes its big splash, right? It's controlling those endpoints. And so what we're looking at here is kind of a brief overview of how Meraki uses Systems Manager. So here what we've got our policies. We were just looking at some of these policies, right? So we've got voice and WebEx. We were just looking, I believe, at throttle no video. So let's throw that one in there for now. And so what this is saying here is, hey, if you've got the tag Cisco and you've got the tag Meraki secure and you're compliant, and I'll talk a little bit about what those mean. Then I'm going to move you into the voice and WebEx group where, you've got unlimited bandwidth, we give you access to everything, you're in the happy zone, right? But if you are a Cisco device and you are violating the Meraki secure policy, now I'm putting you in throttle no video, right? And you can kind of design these security policies however you like. In our sense, in a very corporate fashion, we want to make sure you've got a password on your laptop, that you can't log into your laptop. Without a password, your screen auto locks after a couple minutes, so someone can't walk up to your laptop and wreak havoc while you stepped away, things like that. And that's really the power of Systems Manager. Because we know what's happening on the device, we can make your network dynamically react to it. And so when we jump into Systems Manager, you can kind of see, especially at Meraki, we've kind of got both one-to-one and BYOD. So we hand all our employees a laptop. That's our one-to-one, and then they're free to bring their own, phones, tablets, video game consoles, whatever they want to the office. And so we've got about 2,800 clients online right now that we're managing. And the beauty of this list is how flexible it is. So, if I'm curious and I want to say, hey, let's see if anyone runs Windows, and let's see if anyone runs Windows XP, because that's antiquated. So we've got 2 devices on Windows XP. Thankfully, they haven't come online since 2015. These are like less of an issue for me to deal with. We can even look, is anyone running like Windows 95? Hopefully there's no Windows 95 on our network, so we can look. and it doesn't look like we have any. We can do Windows 7 and start filtering out all of Windows 7. We can do Windows 10. We can start looking for Windows 10 devices. If we were looking for Mac OS, we could do, yeah, Mac OS X, and we can look at all the OS X devices. If we're curious about iOS, we can do iOS, start looking at iOS, and if we wanted to kind of drill down a little bit more, we can start drilling down to 9.3, and that's maybe we have some iOS 10. I don't think we do. It doesn't look like it. But it's a really, really easy way to very quickly search through your network. And you can start kind of customizing this list for whatever you want. So maybe you're more curious about serials, so you can look at the serials of your devices and search by those. Maybe you want to check some security policies on them, base them on location, things like that. And you can start to tag these devices, and that's really the power of Systems Manager. Is once you provide tags to devices, it's a great way to kind of group them. So you can see we've got a couple tags, right? I can search wallboard, for example. We don't have that many wallboards, but what all a wallboard is it's a Mac Mini that we've kind of attached to a computer, and it displays something attached a Mac Mini to a TV, and it displays something on a wall so that people are either informed of, hey, are the Giants playing today, and is there going to be a lot of traffic, or maybe it's how are the sales teams doing, like who's the top sales performer, something like that. But similarly, we can look for employees, right? We can search the employee tag, and they're going to get a different set. So more than half of our devices are non-employee devices. They might be IT devices, they might be test devices, they might be considered just general assets if I wanted to look up asset. So things like that are a great way to kind of figure out and group your devices together. You can then kind of pair that grouping with both applications and settings. So on the application front, for whether it's iOS or OS X, you can start pushing these devices apps, which is really, really cool. Let's say you've got a fleet of iPads and you want to give students Brain Pop. We can go to the iOS apps, we can search for Brain Pop. It'll search the iTunes store, it'll come up with whatever has the phrase Brain Pop in it, and then we can add those. I can choose who do I want to install these to. So right, we've created these groups via tags. Maybe I want to give them to all our employees. I go ahead, hit save. So we've got 75 iOS devices that have the employee tag. I hit save, and just like that, all of them will get Brain Pop. So super straightforward. It took me 3 or 4 clicks. Brain Pop's now on all their devices. I'm not actually going to do that. It's the same story whether it's iOS, Android, OS X, Windows, right? It's a very simple application management story, and that's really the power of it. And what I can also do outside of applications is settings. And this is really the power of Meraki, is that because it's because Systems Manager works based on these, it becomes incredibly simple to push profiles, to push settings, to push applications. And so, for example, for our employees, and this is what we put on all of our devices, we turn privacy on because if you're enrolled in Systems Manager, Cisco Meraki owns the device. We want to know where those devices are. We actually recently found one of our laptops magically appear in Vietnam, and we were able to get it back. We want passcodes, right? At the end of the day, we are a corporation. We want to make sure there's a minimum level of security. So we want, an alphanumeric password. And then VPN. No one likes configuring VPN, so we configure the VPN for them. But we've got a lot more we can do, right? Especially in schools, AirPlay is really important. So you can choose what TVs they can AirPlay to. You can choose Wi-Fi settings for them. If you have the iOS app, we can actually push documents, materials to students. So let's say maybe you're going to push them PDFs of their homework or whatever it might be. You can jump into the restrictions section and you can get pretty granular in the restrictions. You can kind of say, hey, I don't want iMessage. I don't want them to remove my apps. I actually also want to hide the App Store. So if I search for App Store, we can kind of look through it and say, okay, yeah, I don't want the App Store anymore. And maybe I don't want Apple Music and Apple Music Radio on the device either. You can lock the device in single app mode, throw, a web content filter, HTTP proxy, whatever you want to. And so it's really, really straightforward to add things like restrictions to your devices. And then you can change wallpaper on a more advanced front, you can do the education payload and get your education, the classroom app configured for your schools. You can do home screen layout. This is something I'm a particular fan of. So if, for example, I wanted to, let's say, we can add a couple Meraki apps, and I'm just adding whatever apps we use here at Meraki, and we can kind of add some of these, and we can actually, go ahead and start rearranging these if we want to. Maybe I actually want the camera and my contacts and Khan Academy on the bottom dock. It's something I can really easily set forward, move back, so it's really easy to configure your devices. I can add folders if I want, and then I can start adding, maybe now I want to put Brain Pop. And these are all, live searching the App Store. I can grab it. Maybe I'll put Brain Pop in here and call this folder education, and now I've got my education folder that I can jump into and look into Brain Pop. So a very, very powerful, very easy way to get your devices kind of at a uniform set, right? We can add in wallpaper, we can change where the icons are, we can even get it ready for the classroom. But the real power behind this, again, goes back to tags, right? So right now we're applying this to all devices, but we can start getting, right? Maybe this profile with the home screen layout only goes out to employees. And then I decide to make a new profile, and that new profile only goes to, let's say, asset tags or wallboard tags. So it really allows for you to have diversity in your deployment network, right? And since you can pair all of this information with your network stack, you can really create concrete groups and have your network behave differently based on the group, as well as have the devices have different information on them based on the group. And that's kind of the beauty that Systems Manager provides to you. Of course, we integrate with VPP and DEP to simplify the whole onboarding process for iOS. We do some pretty clever things with our policies. So when we were looking at Sentry policies, we were looking at that Meraki secure. So this is Meraki secure. You need your screen to lock after 15 minutes. We require a login and firewall, some disk encryption, and passcode on mobile devices. So nothing too crazy. But if you're not Meraki secure, you get hit with different rules. We put you onto a different VLAN, and as a result, you may not have access to all of the internal documents at Meraki, but this is how we make sure we keep our network safe. And since this is all happening automatically, no IT manager has to run something, every night and then move devices from one group to another group, back to another group, or whatever kind of process that would entail. It's all happening through the back end automatically. And the other really fun thing that we've seen used a lot in schools is geofencing, right? You can create a fence around your school. So let's say, we are looking at the Meraki one. So here's our office over in Terrier, Francois, and we can, increase, decrease the size of the circle. We've actually kept it pretty big. But the moment we know that some of our devices aren't supposed to leave the network. So the moment they walk outside the geofence, we get a little notification. We get an email notification, and then we make a policy change. So, for example, if you walk in, all of the Meraki-owned devices' cameras turn off while they're on site, because we don't need people taking photos. Sometimes we're working on secret projects and we don't need people taking photos and sharing them, whatever they might be. But the moment they walk out of the circle, the restriction goes away and they get their camera back. So they can use, the iPad we gave them to take photos of their kids or watch a video or do something like that. So that difference is all happening automatically based on the geolocation of the device, which is pretty powerful and pretty interesting. And so if we were to jump into, let's say, a client, and I'm gonna, pick a client at random. So let's say we can look at, maybe Adam. And so if we jump into Adam's computer, you can see here's an example. He's currently inside the geofence, right? We see that he's at Terrier Francois. He isn't actually Meraki secure because he's got his auto lock disabled. But you can kind of see we're grabbing a lot of information about these devices, right? You get the serial, you get the warranty information, the version, when they last booted, they're online, a whole slew of live tools, whether it's command line access, network statistics, remote desktop, power control. If you want to send a notification, say hi, You can see their network adapters, processor utilization. You can look at a connection log. You can search the apps that are installed. You can even uninstall applications if you wanted to. So it's a really, really powerful tool to garner kind of your endpoints of your network. Make sure you know who's connecting to your network and how they're connecting to your network. And that's kind of what I had to show you on both the wireless and the EMM side. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Now is a great time. I'm going to also go ahead, jump back to the slides in a little and talk a little bit about that. So there's a question here, what's the best way to onboard current employee devices, desktop computers, laptops, tablets, phones? So we've actually created a really, really interesting thing on our wireless, and it's a splash page that we call Sentry. And so if you go to your access control, and we have this on our corporate network, so I'm going to switch gears to that really quickly. And if you look at that, you'll see that we have this thing here that says Systems Manager Sentry Enrollment. And it basically describes only devices with Systems Manager can access this network. So the only way you can actually connect to the corporate network is to enroll in Systems Manager. And if you're not enrolled, the splash page kind of gives you a button, you click it, and you get enrolled. So it's a really straightforward, very easy to do. Hey, you want to use the wireless? Click this button, you're done. Now you get the wireless, and you're enrolled. Onboarding new devices to Systems Manager in general is kind of you've got a lot of options. So if you jump to the Add Devices page, what you can do is you can go to m.meraki.com and enter a network ID. You can scan a QR code. You can connect to an access point that's got Sentry enrollment on it. You can shoot out a link via email or via SMS. And with Apple Configurator, you can give them enrollment URLs and kind of pre-configure them as you are using Configurator. So there are a lot of ways to get your devices up and running in Systems Manager. So we try to make it, we know that onboarding your devices is probably the most painful part of using an EMM, but we do our very best to make it as kind of pain-free as possible. So what I want to do now is I'm going to kind of jump back slides and talk a little bit about our other product lines. So of course there are the MR wireless access points, right? These are the ones that we talk to first, you can create your BYOD policies, your traffic shaping, your guest access, things like that. We've got the MX security appliance, which is actually pretty cool and I really enjoy in seeing them in K-12 deployments because it does such a great job of security and content filtering. So it really protects your devices from malicious software, kids trying to, go to some website to download a game, turns out the game's a virus. The MX can protect you with AMP, but also just general content filtering to make sure they're not using, school resources to look up gambling websites or anything, ridiculous like that. You've of course got your MS access and aggregation switches, right? So the more and more students using your networks, the more and more, speed throughput you're going to need on your switching. So the ability to manage those all virtually through the cloud is an incredibly powerful resource. There's, of course, Systems Manager, which is my favorite, but I'm also the product specialist for Systems Manager, so I'm slightly biased towards it. And that really allows you to control your devices down to, their wireless, their VPN, what restrictions they have, how they behave on your network. So it's really, really kind of robust system, especially in school deployments, because it allows for that granularity either between grades or between delineation of student, teacher, and IT. One of the more exciting things that Meraki has is it does have an exclusive K-12 offer. So we have that K-12 offer that provides a significant discount on 5-year Meraki gear. It ends July 17th, so we're slowly coming up towards that date. It's only got a year left. It's been running since 2014. It's available on almost all of the MR, MS, or MXs. I definitely reach out to your reseller and if you're curious about it, but it gives you that deep discount on 5-year licensing. And the real reason we're offering it is we want to make sure that we're providing an affordable way to kind of close the Wi-Fi gap in K-12 schools and libraries, right? Wireless is something that students should have readily available access to. The internet is a powerful learning resource. And so it's something that we're trying to get into as many K-12s as possible and kind of really empower the schools and the students to provide that service. The other thing is, of course, E-rate eligibility, right? So with that, You can make sure that your hardware is 100% E-rate eligible. On most of our licensing is, so you've got all of our enterprise licensing that is. Our advanced security is 50% E-rate eligible. Unfortunately, my favorite project, Systems Manager, is not E-rate eligible because it's got no hardware associated with it. But these are all devices that, if you're up, have your E-rate coming up next year is something I think you should keep in mind, especially with that promotion. You can really start to grab a lot of access points and really outfit your school with enterprise level wireless that's wildly easy to manage and not have to pay an arm and a leg to do it, which is the real beauty of it. And I think the next really, really cool part about Meraki, because you can do this at any point in time, is the evaluations. So we have a really, really good free trial program. We'll send you just about anything and everything. So you want 15 access points, we'll ship you 15 access points. You can set it up. We'll pair you with a support specialist who will walk you through the setup process. You can describe maybe the lab you want to implement or your real environment and how you want to deploy these. And you can try it for 2 to 3 weeks. If you love it, you can keep it. If not, you can return it, maybe take some notes. And then, when the next cycle comes up to purchase networking equipment, you'll know you've tested it out, you know it works. And this is like a solution that works for you, or maybe it doesn't. And at that point, you haven't really lost anything because there's no real fee associated to it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you. It looks like we're coming up on our time. It was really, really great talking to you. Again, my name is Vic. I'm the product specialist for Systems Manager. But if you have any questions about, any of our product lines, feel free to reach out to your Cisco Meraki sales rep, and they'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. And I'm really looking forward to seeing kind of Meraki have a bigger impact on the K-12 space and really providing wireless and even EMM solutions to their students and really getting their students the ability to use wireless regardless of where they are, kind of to promote education and promote that growth in the field. So again, thank you for listening to me talk about Meraki and K-12. I hope this was an informative webinar for you, and I hope you guys have an enjoyable rest of your week. Thank you so much.